chess traps this evening. Remember when we were discussing the ideal opening, we said that from white's point of view, you try and get both pawns out in the center. I hope you all know the moves by now. I'm assuming you do. You get the knights out towards the center. Always your pieces out towards the center. You bring your bishops out somewhere towards the center. You get your queen up, just one square. Don't bring your queen out early. We'll see what happens when she comes out early. And then you can castle, either queen side or king side. Usually king side. You move the king over too and bring the castle beside. And then you can bring your castles towards the center somewhere, wherever you expect an exchange of pawns, so that your rooks can zoom up the files. This is an ideal opening. Now what do you do with an ideal opening? Well, the idea is if you have an ideal opening, the enemy is cramped. And if the enemy is cramped, you can provoke structural weaknesses. What are structural weaknesses? We'll get into that later. But right now, try to think of this type of an opening as ideal. Naturally, your opponent's not going to let you get away with it. Your opponent also wants to have all his pieces centralized, to get his two center pawns out. So, as a result of this, has developed a system of openings, and we have names to tag onto each system to help us remember what these openings are. Some of the names are the actual names of people who invented these openings or who happen to have done a lot of studying and published papers on these openings. For an example, if we bring both our pawns out towards the center, both sides have fulfilled the first part of our ideal opening. We have a center pawn pushed out. This center pawn is pushed out. Remember, they can't take each other. Pawns can only take diagonally. Okay? They each have queen and bishop diagonals opened, and each pawn controls center squares. When I say control, I mean you're attacking these squares. Black is attacking these two. See? Now, white can move here, but after pawn takes pawn and queen takes pawn, the queen gets out too early. So white usually doesn't play that right away. This is called a double king pawn opening. Now, if you want to study double king pawn openings, you have to be prepared for a whole array of other things which can happen if black doesn't play that. So I'll just give you an example. We'll learn these later. But if black plays this instead, it's called the French defense. If he plays this instead, we're getting into a type of modern or Yugoslav defense. If black plays this instead, we get into the Alekhine defense, named after a former world champion. If this comes out, it's known as the Nimzovich defense, which is named after Aaron Nimzovich, the great Russian chess player of the 1930s. This is the center counter game. This is the famous Sicilian, which has a lot of various variations. They all have sub-variations. But what I'm trying to show you is that if you want to play a double king pawn opening, you have to know a little bit about the principles behind all these other openings. And there are opening books, volumes of them, which are concerned with these. Now, say the black pawn does come out and you get into your double king pawn opening and you bring out your knight attacking the pawn. You see. Now it's black's move. All right, black can play the Petrov defense. Black can play the Hungarian defense. Black can play, and he shouldn't, the Damiano defense. We'll see that in a minute. If he protects the pawn with his queen knight, which is developing a major piece and not blocking anything else in, then white can play this if he wants, which goes into a type of Giaco piano, we call it, or he can play this, which is known as the Roy Lopez, completely different theory. Notice bishop takes knight leaves this pawn unprotected, you see. I'm just going through this very quickly to give you an idea of what's involved in the theory of just the opening stages of chess. If white stops there, black can play the two knights defense, and there's a whole system in that. If black should play here, copying white's moves, now white has choices. He can play a quiet game, which is called Giaco pianissimo. Pianissimo, very quiet. Giaco is simply the Italian for game. Or white can play this with a threat of building a bridge into the center. And that is known as the gioco piano. It's still a quiet game, but not as quiet as pianissimo. So, you see, they all have names to the systems, and you can have opening books, or you can have people show you what these openings are. We'll be dealing with a lot of them ourselves. And you study the theory, the meanings behind each move. They are all trying to achieve what we showed you as the ideal position, getting your pieces out towards the center and developing as quickly as possible. But there are different ways of achieving that. So the different systems. Now, if you don't open kingside, you can open with the queen pawn. And you have you have your Indian defenses, you have your double queen pawn openings. You may open here, which can transform into what's known as the English opening, or go into the Reti opening, who was a Czechoslovakian grandmaster. There are all sorts of different opening systems, but they all tend towards the same thing, as I said. Quick development, centralization, getting your pieces out. Now, up until the 19th century, chess was played very loosely. It was played with a lot of pizzazz. It evolved a lot of tactics and a lot of sacrifices, and it was slam-bang chess. Those who were well-versed in the tactics of chess, and I'll explain what tactics means in a sec, those who were best in tactics won the game. There was no such thing up to the 19th century as a good positional chess player who understood positional chess. In a way, the evolution of chess theory follows your own chess education. When you learn the game, you go barreling in against the enemy. And it's a good way to learn, because you learn fast what not to do. You play a style of game that was played back in the 1400s and the 1500s. And then gradually you learn the subtleties, the nuances involved in that type of play, and you get to appreciate tactics a little bit more. So you naturally achieve a 17th or 18th century level of play. And then when you get into the 19th century, you're playing, perhaps, if you're good enough, someone like Adolf Anderssen, who won one of the first major international tournaments at Hastings, England, back in 1850, 1851, something like that. But you can be a great tactician, a great slam-bang player, and still be a poor positional player. No matter how good you are tactically, if you play in today's tournament world, you will not achieve a high rating, because you're going to come across people who have evolved the theory of chess so greatly since the 1850s that you won't understand why you can't play the way they played back home at the club. See? So let's look at this tactical type of play. Let's see what happens when things go wrong and how to take advantage of them. Well, let's look at the very shortest possible game that's possible. You probably all know it. I hope you do. It's called the fool's mate. What else? In the fool's mate, white develops either one square or two squares. Let's make him really foolish and move one square out. He's not occupying the center. He's not bringing a major piece out. Black develops a center pawn, right? Black can also develop the center pawn here. He has choices. He can do whatever he wants. If he develops this pawn, now say white develops this pawn up too. Still, no command of the center, no development of pieces. It's black's move now. Black simply brings his queen, his or her queen, right up the diagonal, says check. All right? Now what can happen? The king, of course, can't get out. The king can't get out anyway. The bishop can only go on the diagonal, doesn't hurt the queen. The knight can only go here, that's all, 2 and 1. This pawn, don't forget the pawns can't take, they can only take when they go one square diagonal, right? So that's checkmate, the game's over. Chess is not such a long game, see? People think such a stodgy game that lasts for hours and hours. Let's look at the fool's mate again so you don't follow into it. Don't open up with the side pawn, open up with the center pawn, like black does. You open up with the center pawn now if you've already made the mistake, but no, if you go like this, the game is over. Checkmate. Okay, that's called the fool's mate. Now, one of the most popular attempts at crushing the enemy in the first few moves is known as the scholar's mate. And neither side should attempt it. But people still want to crush the opponent quickly, they'll do it. That's the bishop and queen mate down here. You probably know it. White opens up the center pawn. Well and fine. Black follows. Okay? White develops with the bishop to a center square. So far we're according to our ideal system, aren't we? Notice this bishop is coming down on this pawn. The pawn on f7, notice, is only protected by the enemy king. No other piece protects that pawn except the enemy king. Now, if bishop takes pawn, the king can take the bishop. But if we should get another piece on that, that pawn is gone. Because if there are two pieces on it, the king can't recapture. The king cannot move into check, right? Okay, it's black's move. Say black moves out a knight. Looks good. Development towards the center. Protects the center pawn. Now white, contrary to all our theory, brings the queen out very early and should suffer because of it. But black, let's say black is on the same chess level as white. So he makes a mistake too. He brings out his other knight, which he has been told to do. Both knights developed early. He attacks the queen, but forgets that the queen can move down here. Take that pawn on f7, say check. The king cannot take it because it's protected by the bishop, and that's checkmate. You notice it was also possible in this case to take with the bishop and say check, but there's no point in that because the king can move away. And now the bishop and the queen are both attacked. However, in the other position, our scholar's mate, checkmate. The weakest pawn on the board is your king-bishop pawn. Likewise with white, the king-bishop pawn, because the only piece protecting it is a king. Get two pieces on that enemy king-bishop pawn, that pawn is gone. If you can take it with the queen, you very often get a mate, like this. So that's the scholar's mate. So how come white won a game and brought the queen out early? Well, let's look at the game. Came out there. Why not bring this knight out first? Now the queen can't come here. Now the queen is stopped. Then there's no threat over here at all. You see? Simple. And you're also developing. You can still bring your other knight out after. But it's better to bring the knight out on the king's side because then you can castle quicker. So we've seen our fool's mate, and we've seen our scholar's mate. And what are we learning? We're learning that in combinational chess, there are two factors involved. One, your opponent's error, and two, positional error. You can blunder and have the opponent come in on you in a tactical way by creating a blunder of some sort. This knight move in the scholar's mate was a blunder. White opening up in the fool's mate on the king's side is a blunder way of playing. But there are also positional characteristics which should be looked out for, and we'll see some of those gamelets. Let's look at what happens if we have a double king pawn opening and white develops the knight to bishop 3, attacking the pawn. Good move. Now, this is the strongest reply to that. You're developing a knight and protecting the pawn. Remember our rule of exchanges. I am not going to take this pawn and sacrifice my knight for a pawn because a knight is worth more than a pawn. It's more powerful. So this is effectively protecting that. That's the correct move. Moving this pawn up to protect this pawn is moving this f7 pawn is so weak, is so weakening the king's side that white can in effect sacrifice the knight. Look what happens. Knight takes pawn, black says thank you, takes the knight back. Now, all this is wide open for a very fast white attack. Watch. The queen comes out, check. Notice, if you try to stop the check, we have another check over here, winning the rook. See? Check, something moves in front, wins the rook. So this doesn't work. The king moves. Check. The king has to get out of check, the only square. Bishop comes out. We're developing quickly. Bishop comes out. Check. Where's the king going to go? Can't go back. The king has to come out here. Right? The queen chases him into the corner. See, the king can't take the queen because the pawn's protecting that square. The king has only got one square over there. Look what's happening here. White has given up a knight, force. And look where the black king is being driven all of a sudden because of this bad move of pawn from f7 to f6. How do we get the king now? How about just a quiet little pawn move? Check. That's a discovered check is what it's called. A discovered check is when you move a piece opening up another piece which says check. The only way to get out of this check is to get in the way of it. Okay? Now, black has a king and a queen protecting this pawn. And we have a queen and a bishop attacking it. So it's balanced, isn't it? But look what happens now. Now we put a third piece on that pawn. The pawn can't move because you can't move into check. Nothing can be done, and the next move will be something like this with another discovered. That's a double check. Notice? Check with the rook, check with the pawn, and it's soon over. The game will soon be over. The king is just all crowded in there. All these pieces are coming in very fast. Now, all this started because of one blunder on the part of black, and that was protecting his center pawn with his king-bishop pawn. Now, mind you, people get away with it, but I don't want you to learn bad habits. So even though somebody may not see that he can take this and win the game, don't play this. It's bad to get in bad habits. Answer this move with developing a piece and not opening up your king side. Let's look at another little gamelet which was played by Grandmaster Kostisch about 20-some years ago. An interesting little game because it's a double king pawn opening also, and the knight comes out and attacks the pawn. The knight comes out and protects the pawn. The bishop comes out. Why there? Well, it's centralized. Again, it's attacking the weak f7 pawn. Also, it's getting ready to castle early. So it's a very good move. Now, black comes in here and breaks two rules. One rule is that he's moved one piece twice in the opening. You shouldn't do that. In the first 8, 9, 10 moves, don't move one piece twice. You should get all your pieces out as fast as you can. Deploy them out quickly. Don't waste time moving one piece around. Also, he's left this pawn unprotected. So black has made a bad move. And white grabs the pawn. Now white has two pieces on this pawn, which we saw before was a queen and bishop. Now it's a knight, and a knight and a bishop. Black develops the queen, forgets about this pawn, attacks this knight and this pawn. Okay? Well, this is attacked, so white says, I'll take another pawn. There. King can't take me, protected by the bishop, and I'm attacking the rook, which has no escape. And the rook is a strong piece to get. It's white's move. Don't forget, the queen is attacked too. This, by the way, is what we call a knight fork. A fork is when one piece attacks in different directions at the same time. The knight is attacking the rook. The knight is attacking the queen. The knight cannot be captured, so one of those pieces will probably be lost. It's a knight fork. Now, naturally, we don't want to lose the queen. The queen comes down and takes this rook. This pawn, I'm sorry. Now, Can white afford to take this rook right now? No, because this rook is attacked, and the king has no escape because of this knight. See, 2 and 1, the knight is attacking that square in front. So before we take this rook, white says, white will first bring the rook over and protect it. Black then goes queen takes pawn, check. The king can't move. If the queen comes out, knight takes queen. You're going to lose the game if you lose your queen. It's too powerful a piece to lose. So the bishop comes back. Now look at this. This is pretty. Knight goes over 2 and 1, says check. The bishop can't take it because of the check with the queen. So it's checkmate. And that's what we call a smothered mate. And you can see why. The king has become completely smothered by its own pieces, and the knight is doing the checking. Bishop can't take because of this check, and black has won the game. Now, how did black win the game when we were saying that white made some bad moves? So let's quickly go over how that game progressed and what should have been done. You see, this type of tactical play works only if your opponent makes a blunder. The game went like this. The knight came out attacking the pawn. This knight came out protecting it, developed the bishop, made way for castling, developed his piece to the center. The knight then came in here. We said that was wrong. It left this unprotected, and it also moved a piece twice. What should have been done here is probably this other knight out, you see. But the knight did come in here, so how come white lost the game? White should not have been greedy here and taken this pawn. It looks like a good move with the 2 pieces on here. But it is not, because it allows the queen to come out. Remember how the game went. The queen came out down here, up here with checkmate to follow. What white should have done here is solve the problem with a positional answer. He should have gone knight takes knight. And we'll be learning what this is all about in a talk very soon. Now, why is that a good answer? Why is that exchange strong? Let me show you, just pawn structure-wise. Black has 5 pawns on the queen side, 5 pawns, but only 4 pawns stop them. White only needs the 4 pawns because we've doubled pawns on the queen file. Whereas for the end game, think of the ending. After we've exchanged off a lot of pieces, these 4 pawns march down and only meet 3. So it's very possible that one of these pawns, after exchanges, will get through and be promoted to a queen, and we get down to our basic mates. Notice the pawn structure. 4 against 3. One of them, in the end game, will be a candidate to become a queen. Whereas these 4 stop those 5. So that's a positional exchange. Rather than going for a piece, you stop black's attack immediately and get a better pawn ending, is what we say in chess. What else have we got? These are games that are due to the opponent's gross blunders and errors. Let's look at this funny little one. A queen pawn opening. Black plays for an immediate counterattack. This is a gambit. Gives up a pawn right away. Let's play it quickly. Pawn takes pawn. Now black develops. Attacks the pawn. White develops. Towards the center. Protects the pawn. Black does something strange. Brings the queen out. Usually you bring... the knight can't come out here because it's hemmed in. It could eventually go like that, I suppose, with 2 pieces on the pawn. But black develops the queen. Now we have 2 pieces on this pawn. White develops towards the center. Now we have 2 pieces. White has 2 pieces protecting the pawn. However, the removal of this bishop has left this side weak, and white isn't castled yet. Look what happens. Check. And attacks the bishop. So the only way to save the bishop is to move this back, stop the check, and save the bishop. That allows black to come down here. How are we going to save the rook? Queen takes rook. Well, we can do it this way. Right? This bishop is protected by this knight. The knight is protected by this queen. This bishop stops queen takes rook because the bishop can come down. But there's a trick involved here. This other black square bishop comes up. Now that's called a pin. A pin is when you pin a piece right to its square. This bishop cannot take the queen because of the exposed check. You notice that? White would like to go bishop takes queen, but this bishop would say check, and that's not permitted. So what are we going to do in a case like that? I suppose it's white's move. White would have to go something like this. Either take that, or there's in which case the queen takes back, or the queen can take the rook. Or what if we come up here and protect this bishop with another piece with the queen? Then after bishop takes and queen takes, we forget about the rook. We just sneak in here and say checkmate. You see that checkmate? Okay. There's a quickie little one. Now these are all little gamelets which show us that through blunder the opponent can play tactically. And I haven't been able to get through all of them, but in the course of all our talks we're going to have lots of opening traps that you'll want to learn. Just briefly, I want to show you the difference between two types of pins. I'll just set up a position here. Now let's discuss two types of pins here. This bishop is pinning this knight down because we don't want to lose the queen. You see that? We don't want to lose the queen, so it makes this knight immobile. This bishop pins this knight down because we're not, whoops, let's keep the king there and make another silly move here. Okay? This bishop pins this knight down because the knight is not allowed to move because of the check. So we have two different types of pins here. This is called an absolute pin because the knight cannot move according to the game. This is just a relative pin because you can move. You can always lose the queen, but never the king. That's it for now, and I'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.